Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the panel You Can't Be What You Can't See. This segment of today's Women in the Tech Festival is about whether young people can look to our industry and be inspired. It's about them seeing a path forwards that they can replicate and see themselves walking as well. And it's about making sure we captivate their imagination before they turn away from even considering our industry. So my name is Nima Sherpa Green. I'm a reporter with CRN. I'm very happy to be joined by four executives, and I'm going to go to Anita first to introduce yourself to everyone who's watching.
Good afternoon, I'm Anita Fernquist. I'm the Chief Data Officer and Director of Operations at Zurich Insurance in the UK. I've been at Zurich for 15 years and before that did my training at IBM. I'm also a solo mum to two young boys who keep me very busy.
Great. And then Gemma?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gemma Blumen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Elder. We're a tech-enabled marketplace for elderly care. I've been there for the past 3 years. I cover operations, marketplace, and compliance. And previously, I was at Uber, and before that, I was a consultant. I'm originally Dutch. I don't have children, but I do have a puppy. And in case you hear anything on the background, that's her being needy.
And Tara?
Hi, everybody. Tara McGeehan. I'm the UK and Australian president of CGI. We have just over 6,000 people in my business, of which about a third are female. So this is a very interesting topic for me.
Great. And then Wincy.
Hi everyone, I am Wincy Wong. I'm head of engineering workforce transformation over at NatWest, looking at how we transform and bring in a lot more diverse and inclusive software engineers for the bank-wide, as we believe it's core to our future. I'm also one of the founding members of the TechShikan Charter, which is now over 170 members and organizations who believe in changing education and changing the ratio of women going into tech. In particular, I lead the education work stream. I'm founder of Girls Can Code. I'm also, in my past, I've done a lot of work in terms of implementing the Rose Review, working closely with the government in changing policies, and being very alive to gender issues, I would say, across the UK and why they are barriers for entrepreneurs, including women in tech entrepreneurs. And I also serve as advisory board member and trustee members for a lot of charities around this space, including social mobility.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be joined by you all. Thank you. A quick note to everyone who's watching, if you want to join us, please do put your question into the live panel box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And I'll be sure to check that and put those questions to everyone I'm speaking to. But moving forward for the next sort of half an hour, we've got 4 overarching areas that we'd like to talk about to give it a bit of structure. Firstly, I'll just run through them. How we can make the industry create more diverse leaders in the first place, and therefore role models to look up to. Secondly, how we can make current female tech leaders more visible to younger generations who are considering our sector. Third, how we can access people in leadership roles if we're looking to see mentors to drive us forwards. And then fourthly, as a leader, how female executives can make themselves more accessible. So I'm going to start right at the top then. How can the industry create more diverse leaders and therefore role models? The idea of role models is something that comes up a lot in the panels I speak to. I think if I can start with Anita, if you look around the tech sector, how important would you say this issue is of creating role models for women to look up to?
Well, firstly, I think it's a huge issue, but it's a huge opportunity, because actually it's not so much about creating role models. Actually, we're all role models, whether or not we've chosen to be. Actually, you find yourself suddenly realizing that actually the people that inspired us into our careers probably had no idea they were our role models. I met someone on the train recently and thanked them for being my role model years ago, and they had no idea. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge the importance of role models and that we embrace the fact that even though we didn't sign up for it, it might not sit comfortably. Actually, it's really important that we invest the time and energy in being that. So absolutely don't forget you are a role model, and you have no idea who you might touch, be it actively through working in organizations or in schools, etc., or be it through simply, inspiring the child of a colleague, etc. Really, really important. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the role models I had along the way.
Do any of you think it's perhaps more systematic that companies, especially the very large companies, which can seem a little bit remote and a bit impersonal to employees, is there a responsibility there to have some sort of mentorship scheme to lend a helping hand?
Absolutely. And what's absolutely critical is that we make sure that we have a diverse set of role models that appeal to a diverse organization. I don't think it's as simple as saying, if you take women, saying actually let's put up a female role model. Well, every female's different, every person's different. So having an active program of mentorship that can appeal to different people in different situations, whether they have children or don't have children, whether they work full-time, part-time, all of the diverse sets, that then means that everyone has somebody to look to that appeals to them and that resonates. And organizations absolutely need to help support that, and we as individuals need to do the same.
One thing, if I can add to what Anita said, which I completely agree with, is also as a role model, don't be afraid of being yourself, I guess. You don't have a choice in the matter very much, whether you have liked it or not, you're doing a certain role, and therefore you are a beacon for other people who are looking like you. I think in my early days of my career, I spent a lot of time being, first of all, the American. I was born in New York, quite direct and very different from the very British bank that I'm working in now. I'm also a woman and a person of color, and in most boardrooms, I'm the only person of color as well, and if not the only woman as well. And I would say that in early days, I would spend a lot of time trying to kind of be like the others around me who I see. That innate human desire to belong, I think, is always there. What I would say is that my career started really flying after I stopped trying to be like anyone else and decided to just be myself and be my authentic self. And that's when I started, I guess, becoming even more lively, because it's only when you're yourself that you can do the best work. And when you're doing the best work, you're going to shine. And therefore, I would recommend that everyone not necessarily try to be like a role model they see or someone else that they see, but be themselves and be their authentic selves. And that will open the doors for others who are following the same path and barriers that they are.
Yeah, I would love to add to that. I couldn't agree more. I definitely also started my career thinking that I had to behave in a certain way, be in a certain way. And actually, some of that was due to the role models that I did see, because the organizations that I started my career in had very few female role models, and a lot of them behaved in a certain way. And I would say all of leadership behaved in a certain way. And I felt that I had to be that way to be successful. And it wasn't until I was a middle manager at Uber and I started leading our global diversity group for women. And it was in a very turbulent time for the organization, and diversity was a very hot topic. And it was so close to my heart that I started speaking out about it. I started speaking about it in all hands, raise critical questions, talk about it more publicly. And that was for the first time that people started coming up to me and actually thanking me for who I was and what I was doing and what I was bringing and contributing. And I learned a very valuable lesson there, that actually bringing more of my own passion to work and showing the type of leader that I wanted to be actually was a path to success, and it was the path of success that I wanted to take. And since then, I would say probably the times that I felt the most important role model and leader have been the times that I have been very vulnerable towards our organization, for example, in very tough times, or during times when my team made a really big mistake and we had to speak about it. And those were the times that afterwards people came up and thanked me, and that people refer to when they talk about what they've learned from me. And that was very counter to what I thought in the beginning of my career that a role model and a leader should be like. And ultimately, I think that organizations will succeed from a diversity perspective if they can create a multitude of different types of leadership. whether it be female or male, but different styles that show that you can be a leader in different ways. And we can all contribute to that by, being a role model in our own way.
And just to add to that, from my point of view, I think Gemma's absolutely correct, but just remembering to listen, I think, is really, really key. So we shouldn't assume that we have the answers, creating environments where we can listen to what our staff want to talk about and create listening sessions at different levels in the organisation. One mentor for your whole career is not going to be probably the answer for you, and you need to listen and be able to adapt and bring different mentors into different points in people's careers. So I think creating an environment for listening, certainly in CGI, that's something we spend a lot of time on, not assuming we know the answers as well, just having opportunities to have open sessions with different cross sections of our population and listen hard and then take actions afterwards. I
think that cuts into the second point, Tara, and I'm interested just for myself as well. Other than mentorship and those kinds of initiatives, how else can female leadership be more visible to those in the grassroots in an industry, those who perhaps have questions they don't even know how to articulate yet? How do they gain access to people within an organization other than having role model schemes?
I suppose just carrying on that point, I mean, this time of pandemics, it's become easier to get access to more people, interestingly. I mean, this sort of group here that we have access in today is, you know, my diary was full with face-to-face meetings. I had very little time to do these events, and yet I find myself doing a couple a week now. So, you know, from that point of view, I think that's good to get more direct access to people as you go along, but also just, you know, talking to girls and young people at the point when they're making decisions in their lives and helping them understand that the tech sector is a cool sector to be involved in, I think is quite key. So we spend quite a lot of time, we have initiatives like Bring Your Daughter to Work days, and we all take the responsibility to go to schools and talk about the sector and why it's a good idea. So trying to give back at a point where you gain nothing from it directly, but ultimately the industry will gain in years to come, I think is something we could all do a little bit more of.
Right. I mean, and several of you have very international perspectives. I know, Anita, that you have quite strong views about this issue about making female leaders more visible to the younger generation. What's your view?
So I think at all levels, it really helps. It's about us investing our time in working with educational settings to explain and show the exciting careers that can be out there, actually make it accessible, make it of interest, things that they may not have seen. And particularly when we talk about different social demographics, they might not have had access to corporations and businesses and seen the tech to know that that's interesting. Social media, again, the importance of telling our stories and telling our real stories. And a few of the ladies have mentioned that before. When I was younger, I was offered a female mentor and I said, why would I want that? I'm the same as any guy. I don't need that. That's ridiculous. It's only later on I thought, oh, okay, there's other different issues. So actually, having more accessible and real stories that show that people are human beings, and behind every leader is a real life and a real situation, and actually everyone deals with stuff, I think makes it more accessible. But that outreach into educational settings and into further down the organisation to really make sure that we're inspiring, but also showing that it's infinitely possible. And if you want it, it's possible, rather than showing a glossy, perfect front to it and then making it feel too remote from people who can't imagine that their path is going to be to get there. So we spend a lot of time at Zurich out in those different settings, trying to inspire in different ways.
I think I was going to bring up the Alison Rose review as well, actually, seeing as Wincy, you did mention that. That's something that's come up quite a lot in other panels that I've been involved in. The review in 2018, which found that I think it was for every £1 of venture capital funding that goes into entrepreneurs in the UK, only a penny goes to a company, a startup that is solely female founded, which is obviously incredibly startling. So I know that quite a few of the banks are looking into this now as well. So seeing as that's your position, Wincy, could you talk a little bit about how that plays into all of this?
Absolutely. So, I mean, venture capital is an issue that's littered. It's an industry that's littered with issues. I mean, to be perfectly honest, the UK isn't necessarily in a different place from the rest of the world. I mean, when we looked globally as part of the Rose Review, the best we could find was in America. That was 2% versus the 1% that you see in the UK. So certainly it's not just terrible here, it's terrible everywhere. And I think everyone it should also be aware that venture capital is what funds and powers a lot of the tech startups, the unicorns, and things that we're seeing. And also the areas that they tend to invest in are all the areas that women tend to start businesses the least in. And that is when you talk about manufacturing, technology, and other types. So you tend to see females going into hospitality, service, teaching, education, I would say, and some other services. And those are also the areas that have been hit the hardest during the pandemic as well. So definitely it's an area that's ripe for change and needs to change. We launched last year a policy called the Investing in Women Code, where all the major banks have, 9 of them have signed up for to disclose how much we're investing in women, and also to issue a report annually to talk about that and adopt best practices. And since then, the Future Fund, which the UK launched as part of COVID, they have also not required, but strongly recommended that if you're a VC looking for funding, that you also sign up to the code so that you're more aware of these diversity practices and best practices that we're recommending. So there's definitely that area. To touch upon the younger generations, do you mind if I go back a little bit and just throw down a couple of stats as well in this space, just because it's something I'm hugely passionate about, particularly in the UK. And one of the things that we found in the research, so in my work with TechSheCan, we started with the feeling that we were trying to recruit and hire more diverse technologists across all our industries, and we do span quite a large variety of industries, from banking to supermarkets to retail to everything. And what we found is that we were dipping in the same pool. We just couldn't get enough candidates through. And when we did some research, what we found, and PwC did a lot of this as well, is that at the age of 10, it starts really young. The age of 10, girls are 72% interested in careers in tech, and boys are about 75% interested in careers in tech. By the time they reach GCSE age, so that's around 16, it becomes only 27% girls and 62% boys. And in fact, only 3% of girls would name tech as their #1 profession of choice. And those are some scary stats. So which is why we started the education work stream, which I lead. We started lesson plans, and during the pilot of the lesson plans, we found that girls went from about 29% interested in careers in tech to 47%. So they are lessons that work. And what was different about our lessons is we took a different approach. We took kind of a more diverse approach, I would say, in terms of our thinking versus the other courses that you see out there. We didn't want to focus on coding because we felt like there was so much out there to teach people to code if they wanted to learn. Instead, what we focused on was the gap, was telling them what careers existed in tech. So did you know, for example, Tech for History, these are the different things you can learn about history where we've used technology, or Tech for Inclusion, learning about the different careers you could have, building things to save people with disabilities, or Tech for Climate Change, how you could change the planet, all of these things. And that was the differing point. So not inspiring them about how awesome is it to be able to code in Python and what you can do with Python, but it's more about, did you know that if you had a career in tech, these are the kinds of things you could get involved in. These are the things you could build. These are the kind of businesses you could start. And the overwhelming response that we've had from the thousands of children over the 25 countries that we've hit in the last 6 months have been absolutely incredible to see. And even though they're aimed at 10 to 13-year-olds, we've had children as young as 5 all the way up to 17, 18, even now to actually take that on. Sorry.
No, not at all. Thank you for that. And I would also be remiss if I didn't ask Gemma to join this segment of the conversation as an angel investor yourself.
Yeah, I thought what we just discussed on VC and investment is very spot on. Like, there's a huge gap when it comes to investment in female-founded companies, but the gap actually starts much earlier. And most companies, before they go on to raise institutional capital, raise seed rounds from angels, from family, friends, etc. And that's where the first gender gap actually starts, and less than 10% of funding from angels actually goes to female-founded companies. And one of the things that I found in the past 5 years is that first, when I didn't have any access capital, I worked with early entrepreneurs and younger women in their career to help them on the side, like with their startup, with their ideas, etc. Because that's the point when oftentimes men just have so much more access to help, to advice, but also to capital. And once I had like a little bit of additional money, I've started doing like small ticket sizes in companies that are started by women or have a female founder and a diverse team. And I found this a tremendously valuable way of both giving back, but also really putting my money where my mouth is, because I think that women are hugely underinvested in. It's a big area actually, also from a returns perspective. Like there, 50% of people are women. And there's a lot of tech out there, like femtech, health tech, etc. Topics that actually are not as traditionally invested in, but could have huge markets and huge outsized returns that don't attract the right investment, because simply from an investor perspective, there is not enough women investing. So I think as a woman, if you are really looking to make a difference, one of the best ways to do that is actually to invest in other women, to invest in companies that address female-centric topics, but also to invest in companies that are just happen to be founded by a female, but could be in completely different industries. Like one of the companies I invested in is a sustainable plastic alternative, and it's founded by a phenomenal woman, and she has a diverse range of advisors, but very few of them were female. And someone, again, if you speak to entrepreneurs, their cap table is oftentimes completely male. And one of the best, whereas actually wealth distribution in the UK is not necessarily that distributed by gender. But women tend to invest in much less risky investments, whereas men tend to be more risky in their capital, deployment, and also potentially more geared towards investing in friends or connections, etc. So this is a really big opportunity for women that do have some access capital and want to be able to directly contribute to the ecosystem. And if you don't have that access capital, like mentoring people that are, not in your company directly, but are looking like in smaller businesses, looking to advance their career. One of the things that I found useful is just simply responding to LinkedIn requests. Like I get a few messages a year from young women that are simply looking to be mentored. And that was actually is a tip as well. If you are somebody looking for a mentor, like if you write a thoughtful LinkedIn note or email, 50% of the time people will get back to you and they are willing to jump on that call or such to help you. And earlier in my career, I found that like a very effective way to help people outside of the traditional company structures that I work in. But then later on, investing in females, helping them afterwards raise the capital, like from VCs, etc. I think is something that more women should do. And that would go a really long way to actually closing the investment gap that exists at the moment.
Thank you, Gemma. And thank you, Wincy, as well. Gemma, you touched on LinkedIn and networking and that kind of thing. Tara and Anita, both of you working at very large firms. I'll start with you, Tara, first. If you can share what your thoughts are about, as a leader in your own company, how you make yourself more accessible to people who are looking for that kind of advice, or do you have any sort of wider thoughts about how women in the tech sector can make themselves more accessible in that way?
Certainly within my own company, because we are a tech company and the folks who work for me are very tech savvy, then I do all hands calls, podcasts, I'm on LinkedIn, they can get hold of me and do get hold of me in any of the above, or use the telephone. We still use telephones, I gather. Teams, I think we're all a bit sick of Teams now, aren't we? So Zoom's a nice change, but we're all sort of teamed up, but again, it makes everybody a little bit more accessible, and we'll jump on calls. I actually I agree with the point of catching up with people on LinkedIn. I get quite a few people randomly ping me as well, and if it's somebody that is genuinely asking for something to do with themselves and their careers, I always get back to them. Actually, you get a lot of kind of people touting for work type of notes that aren't as interesting, but people talking about something that's personal, I always get back to them. So I would share Gemma's advice on that. If you're a female looking for a career in technology, be brave. Pick someone that you want to make contact with and go for it. You might be surprised.
And then moving on to you, Anita, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely echo that. I mean, from my perspective, LinkedIn, workplace, so we use workplace as Facebook equivalent at work, and being authentic on that, telling the story, sharing both work related pieces but also life related pieces to make yourself more accessible and more real. We have, again, similarly, I hold all hands for my functions so people can dial in, and I hold sessions called Coffee and Collaborate, where people can just join, have a drink and we just chat, open forum, so people will come through there and either request mentoring or connect. And I chair the Women's Innovation Network, which is a network of 900 women in the UK, where we work with them on 3 pillars. So it's about enabling, working with the organisation to enable change, empowering, so working with individuals to help them to help themselves. That's where the mentoring, the role modelling comes in. And then the engagement, which is engaging with a much broader organisation on just the belief piece that this matters, that it's worth doing, because if we don't change general opinion, then we won't get there. So I think all those touch points are allowing for drop-ins, coffees, panel events like this. We do it across the piece to just make sure that there's as many touch points as possible. But I absolutely echo Tara's point that being brave and reaching out is, people will invariably be happy to take the time. If you don't hear back, try again, because it might just be that they've had lots of requests, but ultimately it's really important that we all take the time to help the next generation and the next level in the same way that we've been helped as well.
Fantastic. Well, I've had a couple of questions come in, and so we'll do a bit of a quick fire to end this panel, I think. So first one, what is the best bit of advice that each panelist received early on in their career? And Gemma, I'll start with you.
I think one of the best pieces of advice that has always stuck with me was when I first took on a management role, and one of the female leaders in the organization told me that the job of a manager is to make your team successful. And that's not the way that I've traditionally looked at leadership, but it is the way that I've tried to look at leadership since then. And I think it's a very good way of looking at any type of management or leadership role.
Okay. Tara, I'll come to you next.
Best advice I've had, and I give it to everybody, is don't assume you have to have all the answers. The best leaders ask for opinions and then collate and come up with the right answer. Don't assume you have to know everything.
Okay, Anita?
On a different vein, I think from my perspective, best advice I had that always resonates with me is your career is a marathon, not a sprint. So think about it that way, actually deciding where you put the energy and how you pace yourself and how you think about the long game is as critical as anything else. It was advice that my cousin was given at a retirement party by somebody, and who'd said to her on his retirement, had he not treated his career as a marathon, he wouldn't still be there. So pacing yourself.
Nice.
And having balance in the mix as well, because you've also got to have and enjoy your life at the same time.
Fantastic. And then Wincy, before we move on to the final question, what's your view?
So I'd probably say the key one for me is that the best coaching and the best advice, mentorship, sponsorship, etc., all of those that you would have isn't always from your line manager. So look elsewhere. So your line manager has been put in to do a certain job, to manage you and to get best out of you for objectives for the team, not necessarily the best for you in the long run, in your marathon, so to speak. So seek advice outside of that. Try to get as many points of view in terms of coaches, mentors, sponsors, etc. And I can go into a long way, but which I won't, about mentorship versus sponsorship, but certainly that has been a life-changing bit of advice that I got early on.
Fantastic. And then we've got, I think, about a minute and a half left to go. So final question, what makes a successful mentee? Perhaps from your own experience. Again, quick fire, I'm just going to start with you, Gemma, again.
somebody who's proactive, like don't wait for your mentor to reach out, but also respectful of the mentor's time. So be proactive, share a few times, dates, and then yeah, be flexible, and you'll definitely be able to get on their calendar regularly.
Fantastic. Tara?
Do a little bit of prep before you turn up for the session. Think about what you want out of the session and help structure it a little bit.
Great. Anita?
Be honest, not just with the person mentoring you, but with yourself. Really think about deep down what it is you want and what it is you believe, because you can't tackle it if you're kidding yourself.
Okay. And Wincy?
Probably open-mindedness to actually change, because I've mentored a lot of women, some of which I gave a lot of advice to and proceeded to not listen to a single thing I say and do the opposite. So that's very demoralizing for someone who's a mentor or sponsor, I think, if that happens. So if you're going to ask someone for advice, then be open-minded to actually listen and take forward some of their advice.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad we got those questions in at the end. I'm hoping everyone who's watching found that really useful. And of course, I want to end by saying a massive thank you to Anita, Gemma, Wincy, and Tara. Really appreciate your time today. Have a good rest of the day, guys.
Thanks, Nima.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.